Hello, everyone, and welcome to Module 1 of Exploring Curriculum for Young Children. And we will be focusing on the whole child. And so to get started, I want to go ahead and introduce myself. So my name is Joanna Parker, and I will be your facilitator for this course. This course is completely online, and so all of the work that you will be doing will be done online. And that work will include a lecture, a short presentation from me, as well as other resources and information. And so just to give you a little bit of information about me and who I am, I have worked in early care and education the entirety of my career. Which at this point is quite some time. For Fairfax County, I started working around the implementation of our previous quality improvement system, VQ, which has now transitioned to VQB5. And then so in that role, I was supporting programs and providers who were applying for level 4 or a 5 in that previous version of the system, and arranging for observations where we would be doing observations using both the class tool and the environmental rating scales. Now, as you know, a big part of VQB5 is that everybody is observed using class. So I then transitioned into being part of the IFL team and focusing full-time on professional development and training. As part of that, I facilitate the Introduction to Early Childhood course. I also teach some courses that focus on interactions in the class tool, particularly for family day home providers, as well as this session on curriculum, and another course on observation and assessment, which I am in the process of transitioning into a completely online course. One of the things that we really want to do in our support of educators is to provide professional development using lots of different modalities, right? And so we offer workshops and sessions that are available in person. We offer webinars and short sessions. We offer our longer courses, which are offered in a combination of approaches. You can have courses that have Zoom sessions and Canvas, or you can have like the courses that I teach where it is completely online and asynchronous, which means that you are doing all of the work on your own. And so as part of this, you will be engaging in the course, doing all of the work, following your own schedule and availability. But we still want you to have the opportunity to talk to one another and connect with one another. And so in terms of introductions to one another, I do want to go ahead and take us into the course itself. So here we are in Canvas. You have been invited to Canvas, and we have walked through this and talked about it a little bit in the orientation for this course. But you can see here that this is what the course looks like when you first log in, when you've created your account. And you can see that I have invited myself to a number of courses here. So, for example, the Exploring Curriculum for Young Children. So if I accept that, and I'm going to go ahead and accept the other course that was sitting out here. And so then when I am in my dashboard here, right, you can see that there is the table of content, so to speak, along the left-hand side. So right now I'm in the dashboard. And when I'm in the dashboard, I can see all of the courses that I am enrolled in. And so this is the course that we are in. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And each week, a new module will be opened for us. And so for this first week, it is our focus on the whole child, which is our focus for this first session. However, I want to highlight for you that there is a discussion here where you can talk to each other and introduce yourselves. And so this is where you will be introducing yourself and sharing a little bit, right? So you can go ahead and go in and respond to the questions here where you're going to introduce yourself, share a little bit about yourself. I really would love for folks to share a photo of themselves. And then to at least respond to one other educator. So again, as we are thinking about these introductions and getting to know each other, that where you will get to know one another is in the course platform itself in Canvas. So let's go ahead and continue with our content for this first session. So as we are talking about the whole child and what the whole child is and what that looks like, right? We are going to be grounding that conversation in developmentally appropriate practice and looking particularly at the core considerations of commonality, individuality, and context. We will be talking about developmentally appropriate practice, and we'll be looking at the statement from the National Association for the Education of Young Children, or NAEYC, around developmentally appropriate practice, or DAP, many, many times. In fact, our second module will be completely focused on developmentally appropriate practice. But as we get started, I do want to start our conversation and thinking about what is the whole child and what does that mean within the lens of commonality, individuality, and context. And so again, if we go into my browser and I take, let's go ahead and move into to the NAEYC website. I have pulled up here for us our core considerations to inform decision-making, which is part of the statement on developmentally appropriate practice. Again, if we scroll down here on the right-hand side is the table of contents where different sections on developmentally appropriate practice live. And so you can click on any of these links, and we are currently on the page for our core considerations. And so when we look at our core considerations and thinking about developmentally appropriate practice and children's development, we have commonality, which looks at development and research around what children should know and be able to do and how children develop and learn, right? We also have information around individuality and thinking about individual children and getting to know the development of each child, because each child develops at their own rate and pace, right? And so development looks different for every child. And then context, thinking about not only the social and cultural context for the child and their family, but also thinking about your own context and what it is that you believe is most important for young children and how that impacts how you think about teaching and learning, as well as the context of your program and what is the overall philosophy and approach of your program, and really recognizing that that context piece also really impacts how we think about children's development. And how we think about developmentally appropriate practice, and that knowledge around commonality, individuality, and context should inform everything that we do in early childhood. In particular, I do want to highlight here for you a specific paragraph when talking about commonality and thinking about what we know about children's development and how children develop and learn, and what is the science and research that supports us around this, right? And so this statement says, when considering commonality these in development and learning, it is important to acknowledge that much of the research and the principal theories that have historically guided early childhood professional preparation and practice have primarily reflected norms based on a Western scientific cultural model. Little research has considered a normative perspective based on other groups. As a result, differences from this Western, typically white middle-class monolingual English-speaking norm have been viewed as deficits, helping to perpetuate systems of power and privilege and to maintain structural inequities. So this is pretty powerful language coming from our national association. And what this is really helping us to think about is that what we prioritize in terms of the experiences that we offer to young children, the skills that we support and focus on through our interactions, is connected to our own values and beliefs, our own culture, and what we feel is most important, right? And so when we look at the child development research and theories around how children develop and learn, we have to be aware of the fact that the folks that originally were doing that research and putting together that information were really basing their thoughts and their research on specific groups of children and specific ways of caring for and educating young children, right? And so this may look different for different groups and in different places. And a really, I think, straightforward and simple example of what this might look like is to think about this through the lens of independence. That within the broad main culture of America, right, the United States, we have a big focus on individualism and a focus on self-help skills. And we really want children to be independent as soon as possible. And this often is also a big part of the culture of early childcare as well, because when we are working with young children in groups, it is very helpful when they know how to put on their coat, when they know how to toilet independently or feed themselves, right? But for some, independence is not what is most important. That individual is not what is most important. It's that sense of being part of a greater whole, that connection to others, being part of community, being able to accept the help of others. And so for many, there is not the focus on self-help skills and making sure that children are feeding themselves at as young of an age as possible, or toilet training at as young of an age as possible, right? And so this might look different. However, the children do not have a developmental delay or a disability just because they may not have a specific skill, right? Another example might be something as simple as the fine motor skills connected to cutting with a pair of scissors, right? That we may expect that 3 and 4-year-olds know how to cut with scissors, but if that 3 or 4-year-old has never seen a pair of scissors, they're not going to know how to do that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there is a delay in terms of their fine motor skills or that they're behind, they just haven't had those experiences, right? And so we really have to think about how we talk about this. In addition, as we think about commonality, individuality, and context, and we think about developmentally appropriate practice with curriculum, there is also a section here that talks about planning and engaging curriculum. And this also has some good information. And again, we will dive into this more deeply in our second session that is focused on developmentally appropriate practice. But I do want to take us here briefly to look at this paragraph around this concept of mirrors and windows. So here it says, the idea of mirrors and windows is useful for curriculum development. The curriculum should provide mirrors so that children see themselves, their families, and their communities reflected in the learning environment, materials, and activities. The curriculum should also provide windows on the world so that children learn about peoples, places, arts, sciences, and so on, that they would otherwise not encounter. In diverse and inclusive learning communities, one child's mirrors are another child's windows, making for wonderful opportunities for collaborative learning. And so really what I want you to be thinking about, even as we are just getting started and beginning to think about what is curriculum and what is it that we're talking about when we talk about curriculum, in that you want to make sure that the experiences that you are planning for children reflect the children themselves, right? That children can see themselves in your environment, can see themselves in the materials that are in your environment and in the experiences that you are planning and implementing, but also through your curriculum that you are exposing children to things that they may not see and experience in their daily lives, right? So this idea of mirrors and windows is one I encourage you to think about. And again, we will be reflecting upon this more as we move into our second session or module next week. So with our agenda and our focus for this first session, I also want to introduce you to the areas of development and looking at the Virginia Early Learning and Development Standards, because that is another key component as we think about how, what the whole child, that concept means, and how we support children's development. And this also connects us back to our conversation around commonality, in that the areas of development that are defined and described in our Virginia Early Learning and Development Standards are based upon the research around what it is that we know about children's development, what children should know and be able to do at different ages of stage of development, and thinking about how children learn, right? So again, if we go back into my browser, another resource that I wanted to share with you are the Virginia Early Learning and Development Standards. And we will be diving into these more and more depth as we move along through our course. But a big part of curriculum is being very clear around what it is that children know and are able to do, focusing on that current level of development, as well as thinking about what it is we want children to know and be able to do, and what are the things that we're going to do to support that. And it all is focused on these areas of development or domains, right? So if we look at our early learning standards, we have our main domains, right? So there are 5 central domains that are discussed really in all state early learning standards. We have approaches to learning, which looks at children's curiosity, engagement, and persistence. We have social emotional development, which looks at children's sense of self, their relationships with others. And we have language and literacy development, as well as looking at health and physical development and cognitive development, right? So those are our 5 main domains. And within each of these domains or areas of development, the Virginia Early Learning and Development Standards walk us through what this looks like, right? And so we have our developmental indicators, right, for each of the areas of learning, as well as the focus area, right? So we have the area here is approaches to learning. Our sub area is curiosity and initiative, and our focus area is being curious learners. And so we can think about this as an outline of, we're getting from our broad domain or area of development, we're getting more specific and focusing specifically on curiosity and initiative. And then we're getting even more specific and thinking about curiosity, right? Being a curious learner. And then we have our progression here, which helps us to look at what this looks like from infants through preschool age children. And this is organized into these stages of early infancy, later infancy, early toddlers, later toddlers, early preschool, and later preschool. And so you can read these descriptions and you'll see a big difference between what curiosity looks like for our young infants in the first 8 months of life versus our older preschoolers who are 4 to 5 years of age, right? And so again, our early learning standards are just giving us information about children's development and what that looks like and what children should know and be able to do. And so as we move through our content and looking at curriculum, our domains of development, these areas of development, and our Virginia Early Learning and Development Standards are going to be a key part of this, right? And again, my intent with this first session is really just to be getting us started and introducing you. And so as we think about the whole child from the lens of development and the early learning standards, it's really recognizing the fact that children learn across the domains, right? That we don't support a child's social emotional development in isolation, right? That we don't support a child's early language and communication skills or their early literacy skills in isolation, that children learn different skills across the domains through the interactions and experiences that we are offering. So when we are supporting children's play with blocks in our classrooms or our programs, right? Not only are we supporting children's social emotional skills and their ability to interact with us, maybe interact with peers, we're supporting their approaches to learning in terms of their ability to persist and play, their curiosity, their engagement. We also might be supporting their language through the conversations that we're having with the child and the questions that we're asking. We're supporting their cognitive development as we're supporting them in brainstorming and thinking about what they're going to build with the blocks and how they're going to build with the blocks, right? So on and so forth, right? We really are supporting children's development across the domains through the experiences and interactions that we are offering across our day as early childhood professionals. In addition, as we think about our whole child, we also want to be thinking about temperament, right? That it is not just what the child knows and is able to do in terms of the areas of development. But again, as we think about this concept of our commonality, individuality, and context, we're now moving into this individuality piece of really looking at the individual child and what is it that we know about the child and who that child is. And temperament is a good source of information. So again, if I move us back into my browser, another resource that I wanted to share with you, and this is a site that I'm going to be taking you to pretty often because they have lots of really great information. It is the Head Start Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge Center, or ECLKC. The best way to find this website is just to Google or search ECLKC, and that will give you the link. And when I got to the site, I just entered into the search box here, temperament, and that took me to this page, right? And so this is a really great tool that supports us in understanding temperament. There is an introduction to temperament, which I can click on here, that tells us about the 9 traits that are part of temperament, that we are looking at a child's activity level, distractibility, intensity, regularity, sensitivity, so on and so forth, right? And this just gives us information about who a child is and what their personality is like and how they approach learning, right? We all have temperament. We have preferred styles. Temperament is actually part of our physical development. It is part of our biology and our brain and how our bodies work. As adults, we have figured out strategies to adjust our temperament to meet the different environments and expectations that we are in, right? But with children, they are still learning, right? So lots of information here around temperament. If we go back to our previous page, there is then again additional information. We have our temperament trait chart where we take these 9 traits and we think about them in 3 categories, right? So we have, when we look at what this looks like in terms of high intensity, low intensity, and we can think about our children who are active, our children who are more hesitant and slow to warm up, our children who are more flexible. We often talk about these 3 categories of our fearful, our flexible, and our feisty children. And so that gives us a little bit more information about how these traits work together. And then we have our tool, which is actually a way of where you can look at your temperament and the temperament of a specific child, and really comparing your temperament and that child's temperament, and what are ways that you can get to what we call goodness of fit, of where we are interacting with and supporting very young children in ways that matches their needs, right? So you can complete this completely online. This is also something that you could share with parents. It is designed specifically for infants and toddlers up through age 3. I would argue that this is important information as we think about our preschool age children as well. So again, this is a just getting started, just beginning to think about all of these different parts, right? I could talk to you about all of these things for hours upon hours, and so I don't want to get too deep. But again, as we're thinking about how we're supporting the whole child and thinking about who a child is and how we meet that child where they are, we don't just think about their development and what it is they know and are able to do, but we also have to think about their temperament and how they approach learning, and their style and preferences, right? And then the third piece that we want to be thinking about is that culture and language, which gets at context, and thinking about what is the social and cultural context of the child. And part of how I want to support us in thinking about that is through a developmental theory by a theorist named Bronfenbrenner, with the ecological perspective. And so I am going to go ahead and let's see here. Going to take us to our whiteboard. Okay. And so as we are thinking about this, I am going to draw a visual of what I am talking about in terms of Bronfenbrenner and the ecological perspective. So I'm hoping that you all can see this. So here in the middle is our child, right? I'm just going to put an X for the child, but we can think about the child is there in the middle, right? And so the first thing that we want to be thinking about are the primary relationships. So in many ways, we're thinking about who are the people that a child is spending time with, right? And so we're thinking about family members, we're thinking about you as educators, childcare providers. We might be thinking about people in the neighborhood, in the community, different people that the child is spending time with. Who are the important people in that child's life, right? Then in our next circle, we are thinking about the spaces where children spend time. So this is really looking at that environment piece, right? And so children spend time in your program, they spend time at home, they spend time in the community, at the library, at stores, at church, whatever the different places are that children spend time. And it's really important for us to be aware of where those spaces are, right? So we're thinking about who children are spending time with and where children are spending time. And for some of our kids, we may not be the first place that they're going in the morning. They may be somewhere other than home, before they get to us. And they might be going somewhere other than home when they leave us, right? And so being aware of those different spaces. In our next circle, we're thinking about the supports that are in place for the child and the family, right? And so sometimes we talk about this in terms of systems. So for example, the education system, which we are a part of, right? The family might also be thinking about employment and the job market. So is the family employed? The family might be receiving supports through social services. They may be involved in the judicial system. We may have families with parents or family members who are incarcerated. We may have children who are in foster care. There are all sorts of different systems that families are engaged in. We want to think about housing and where the family lives and what supports they have there. So it's thinking about all of those pieces that impact who the child is and impacts the child's experiences, right? And this gets us to begin to move into, in many ways, when we're looking at all of these layers that are part of this theory, we're really getting into and exploring more deeply context when we think about developmentally appropriate practice and commonality, individuality, and context, that we're moving between our individuality and thinking about the individual child, but also that broader context that the child is living in, right? And then our final circle here is where we are thinking about culture and language, beliefs and values. So being aware of what is most important for the parent, for their child, what are their hopes and dreams for their child, and all of those pieces, right? Okay, so here is where, let's see what happens here. Okay, so I am going to go ahead and take us back into my browser. And I do want to take us back into our course platform because as we are thinking about the whole child and particularly this discussion around Bronfenbrenner and all of the things that impact who a child is, right? If we go back to our homepage, this takes us to the assignment for this week, right? Of where you are going to be identifying a child that you know well and who you have access to because you will be observing this child as part of the activities for this course. And you are going to be filling out and completing this child web. right? And so this is a handout that you will be filling out. And you can do this in a number of ways. You can download this and print it and just take a photo and submit a photo of it. You can also type up the information in a different format and submit that as a Word document or PDF, whatever works best for you. But this is where you're thinking about a lot of the things that we talked about with the Bronfenbrenner ecological perspective, right? Of where are the settings where the child spends time? What are the child's strengths and abilities? What are the individual characteristics of the child? What is the child like? How do they approach learning, right? What is it that they prefer? And you get at some of the temperament pieces here in terms of diversity in learning. Are they hands-on learners? Do they really want to watch and see what's going on before they jump in? Are they curious and excited? Are they really active learners? All of those things. You're going to be sharing about the family and significant relationships. So again, you know, that center of the circle of who are the people that the child spends time with, who are those primary relationships, what are some strengths, the life and culture of the family, what do you know about the family? And probably by filling out this form, you're going to realize there's some things that you don't know and some questions that you might have, right? And so you're going to be identifying that as well. And in the middle here, you're just going to put the child's initials and age. I do prefer that the child is within our age frame of early childhood from birth to age 5. I do recognize there may be some other circumstances of where you might pick a child who is a little bit older than that. But again, this is going to be a child that you are most likely observing as part of your assignments for this course. And so it does make sense that we want to make sure that the child is within the age range that we talk about in early childhood. Okay. So with that, oh, and the last thing that I do want to share with you, if we go back to our homepage, in addition to this video, you have a lot of other content that is in the media reading and resources, right? And so I have some additional videos that give you more information about what we mean when we talk about the whole child approach and how we support the whole child. I do have a booklet here, which actually is published by Teaching Strategies, the publishers of Creative Curriculum. So it is a little bit talking about their curriculum, but at the end of the day, creative curriculum is really just developmentally appropriate practice and this applies to many different curricular models. But that provides you some good information about what we mean when we talk about the whole child. And then there also is a podcast for you to listen to. So lots of different information and resources for you here. So with that, that does take us to the end of the content for this session. So I have appreciated spending this time with you. Oh, and that was not very successful. I wanted that to take us to the last slide for our time together, but that was not working. So we're just going to go back to our homepage. So again, each week you will have a short lecture like this video that walks you through the focus for the week, as well as some additional resources and content. Please reach out with any questions that you might have, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care, everybody.